Breaking news where the Denver Broncos have parted ways with Nathaniel Hackett. The Broncos coming into this one 4-11 in 15 games for Hackett's first season. And it didn't show yesterday against the Rams, but the defense certainly has done its part. But the offense, which is Hackett's forte, 15.5 points per game, which is last in the NFL. 316.6 yards per game, which is 26, and then also third down percentage is last in the league. They brought in Nathaniel Hackett to pair him up with Russell Wilson. The two together have not met or exceeded any expectations out there in Denver, which for their fans had hoped to be a playoff team. All right, with more on the breaking news, we have our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones, joining us here on CBS Sports HQ. So, JJ, what more can you tell us about what we're learning today?
So, Tommy, the Walton Penner Group, that's the new ownership group of the Denver Broncos. Remember, they purchased the Broncos over the summer when it officially was approved. They did not hire Nathaniel Hackett. That was the previous ownership group, along with general manager George Paton. And so they didn't bring him on. That's what everyone has to know here. Number two, you mentioned it perfectly, how there were high expectations there in the Rocky Mountains for a team that hadn't made it back to the playoffs since they won the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 50 about 7 years ago. So those things said, with these expectations, with an ownership group that didn't hire the man, well, now you go 4-11. And your most recent loss was a 51-14 drubbing on national television, where a cartoon character is almost making fun of what's taking place on the field, and you have players shoving each other on the sideline. You have another player fighting opponents after the game. You have a quarterback who looks like a shell of himself, who was so resigned to the fate of this year after the game that he didn't even put on a suit. He still went out there and was nearly despondent. This is what happens for the Denver Broncos. Nathaniel Hackett is fired, and he's fired because his core competency, as one league source put it to me a couple weeks ago, was showing to be a deficiency. Remember, he was brought in to lead this offensive revolution for the Denver Broncos. They didn't yet have Russell Wilson when they hired him, but they had their sights set on getting a quarterback who could get them back to the playoffs, much like Peyton Manning did those years ago. And instead, the offense took a step back. We have to go back to the start of the season when Nathaniel Hackett realized, I need help managing these games. And so he brought in a previously retired coach to help him with some clock management, game management, and situational football. And then he gave up play calling duties about a month later to Clint Kubiak. And so now your offensive guru, who's the head coach, isn't calling plays and needs help for timeouts and situational football. You're losing close games, and now you're getting blown out and not at all competitive in a season full of expectations. The Walton Penner Group wanted to wait until after the season. They didn't want to make such a move during this year, but after losing 51-14 on Christmas Day, it's no wonder why they made the move today.
So there are several which ways we can go in terms of follow-ups. I do want to get back to what you sort of talked about and ended with Nathaniel Hackett. You talked about competency, deficiency, and you can go all the way back to his NFL debut against the Seahawks, as you mentioned, sort of game management and the ability or inability to handle those things. From day one, it looked like Nathaniel Hackett was under social media scrutiny, Bronco country scrutiny. When did things start to build in terms of getting to a point here? As you mentioned, they wanted to wait ownership to maybe till the end of the year, but as of today, couldn't wait any longer.
You know, I found it a little interesting when I was out there during my training camp tour. Nathaniel Hackett and the Broncos, they didn't really do a whole lot of 7-on-7. It was the understanding that they wanted a whole lot of team drills because 7-on-7 work, well, that's not real football. Well, what you need and what kind of helps with 7-on-7 is you get some easy wins for the offense. You get to build up some confidence over there. And so when you're in those team drills against a pretty good defense that the Denver Broncos have, and you're installing a new system with a new quarterback there, that's going to take some time for the Denver Broncos offense. So I didn't see them get many easy wins, any of the layups that a lot of offenses love to get in July and August. And then you get into week one against the Seattle Seahawks, and obviously it meant plenty to Russell Wilson. But the decision to kick that field goal and the timeouts, and it was very, very bizarre. And his behavior after the missed field goal and really trying to call those timeouts was really strange. And I know that it weighed on Nathaniel Hackett a great deal. He tried not to show it. He put on a very brave face in front of the team, certainly in front of the cameras. But I know that that weighed on him a great deal. And he had been assured, hey, yeah, it's week 1, but you're going to get this figured out. And then just a bunch of close games, a lot of one-score games that just weren't going the Broncos' way. You know, that's normally a sign of a bad team or a young team, but that's not what the Broncos were. And then really the tide started to shift. I guess it was about a month ago when they lost by double digits to the Carolina Panthers with an interim head coach in Carolina. They thought that the offense was going and getting going against the Kansas City Chiefs recently, but really it was just how flat this team looked on Christmas Day against the LA Rams, how incompetent the offense appeared. I mean, mustering 14 points, and while the defense gave up 51, one was, I think, a pick 6, so not all in the defense, but a head has to roll. And for the Walton Penner group, who did not want to seem impetuous, who didn't want to let everyone in the NFL know, hey, here's how we're going to run the team. We're going to fire the guy midway through the season because we don't like the results because we didn't hire him. They were going to be patient. But once that game right there takes place, you can't be patient anymore. And so they're going to go ahead and begin the head coaching process immediately with 2 weeks left in the regular season, because why wait?
And let me get you out of here on this then. What are the chances they continue with an offensive-minded head coach to pair with Russell Wilson? What are the chances that George Paton is still there? He got a vote of confidence from Greg Penner today.
Yes, so George Paton will remain. He will work in consultation with Greg Penner, the team owner, CEO, in trying to find the next head coach of the Denver Broncos. And so that's going to be there. Next question, who's going to work with Russell Wilson? You know, a lot of people would have the question, is Russell Wilson going to be there next year? Well, he's going to have to be, because that contract, I mean, you look what you give up in order to get Russell Wilson. Maybe the Seattle Seahawks knew a little something. But that deal that he signed in the offseason, 5 years, $242 million, it's only paid out half of the guarantees so far. He had $124 million in fully guaranteed money at signing. That's, as we see right there, the essential guarantees, but it's only paid out about $57 million of the $124 right now. The Broncos can't get out of this contract in 2023. You could argue they can't get out of it in 2024 without doing some serious damage to how they would build the rest of the team. So you're stuck with Russell Wilson because no one is trading for him. Now you have to find a coach who is going to fix Russell Wilson because, again, you're stuck. You have to figure it out with him. And so is that going to be someone like Sean Payton? That's a name that everyone is going to be talking about, and you'd understand why. The Broncos ownership group, this is Walmart heirs and executives. They have the money to bring on Sean Payton. Do they have the draft picks to send to New Orleans in order to get Sean Payton, because you'd have to trade for him? Is he going to want to come in there and work with a George Payton? Is he going to want to work with Russell Wilson? So that's going to be the name on everyone's list, the top name. There's a report out there that he's been bringing Vic Fangio along with him as his defensive coordinator. Does Vic Fangio want to go be the defensive coordinator where he was the head coach? You know, a lot of questions about that one, but if you're looking for the next head coach of the Denver Broncos and you're making a list, Sean Payton will certainly be the most talked about name on that list.
And Sean Payton we've seen doing TV at the moment, and soon Nathaniel Hackett joining him in terms of being on the sideline, out of the mix. Jonathan Jones, appreciate the information and the insight as always. And for the Denver Broncos, 2 more regular season games left to go in the season, at Kansas City on New Year's Day, and then at home against the Chargers on the 8th. The guys at the Inside the NFL crew will be talking about that. New episode dropping every Tuesday exclusively on Paramount+. All right, when we come back, continuing coverage of the breaking news, Nathaniel Hackett out in Denver. We're going to check in with our Super Bowl champ, Ryan Harris, Mr. Bronco, going to be joining us on theCUBE, telling us what it's like out there in the Rocky Mountains and what's next for this team that had high expectations coming in. Let's get to Denver with our Super Bowl champ, Ryan Harris. Ryan, first off, what's the mood like in Denver today, right now, with the news that Nathaniel Hackett no longer there with the franchise?
Well, fans are relieved. Anybody watching these Broncos this year, it has been a struggle, unwatchable at times. Only 3 games with multiple touchdowns. the defense playing well enough to help you win multiple games, but then your offense just unable with Russell Wilson and then better without Russell Wilson to try and win you a game. So fans are elated. This is a big day for them. Things just did not work out. And I will say, Nathaniel Hackett was both a victim of circumstance and this had to happen out of necessity. Circumstance, over $60 million on the IR while Nathaniel Hackett was head coach. But the circumstance, they were unable to compete even against a Rams team that had nothing to play for. So they absolutely were destroyed offensively, a place where he came in, Nathaniel Hackett, and said, hey, we're going to score a lot of points. Well, that didn't happen with Russell Wilson. This was an issue for them all season long. And after that embarrassing loss, time to go.
So you're a former offensive lineman, Super Bowl champ, Ryan. When you look at this offense, and Nathaniel Hackett's forte is that side of the ball, how do you describe the inefficiency of a team that scored an NFL worst 15.5 points per game this season?
Well, number one, he tried to be the quarterback's best friend. You can't do that. Even when we won Super Bowl 50, there will be stories told for years about Peyton Manning and Gary Kubiak getting into it. You cannot be a star's best friend in the NFL. Nathaniel Hackett took the friend approach, and then there was no coming back. There was no recourse to put pressure on Russell Wilson and force him to perform. And the other thing, even halfway through the season, Nathaniel Hackett said, we're not going to change anything. Head coaches, if you're going through a losing streak, change everything. What kind of stubbornness is this? And for this reason, I believe that the Broncos will go after a veteran head coach, somebody who had been there before. And Tommy, for me, that is no question Leslie Frazier. What he's done out there at the Bills, he's the best candidate with the most experience. They went for a young guy in a great interview last time. I think the Broncos are going to be a little more institutional in how they want their head coach to come in. And they want to know that the head coach can crack the whip to get guys moving right and left and winning games, because that has not happened since I played, Tommy, 7 years ago.
It's interesting. I was about to ask you what the Broncos country wish list would be, and it may differ from what you said. And you bring up Leslie Frazier, amazing job in Buffalo. But if a lot of Broncos fans are saying our problem was offense, not defense, and you bring in Leslie Frazier, and what confidence level would you have then to get Russell Wilson cooking and that offense going next season?
Well, Leslie Frazier understands what few defensive coordinators do. A great quarterback makes your defense better, right? He's learned that the last couple of years with Josh Allen at the Bills. But also, the Broncos might not have Ejiro Evero as their defensive coordinator. He's going to get some calls. Now, remember, he won the Super Bowl with the Rams, came over to be a defensive coordinator here at the Broncos, still has a top 5 defense in terms of yards allowed. He might be a head coach next year. So what you need is somebody who, whether you have a defensive coordinator, need to choose an offensive coordinator, improve on special teams, they have answers. Only experienced head coaches have that. That is a small list, but with the Walton Penner family, there's enough there to go and get who they want. I know you and Jonathan mentioned earlier getting Sean Payton. I'm just not a huge Sean Payton fan. Outside of the one Super Bowl he has won, he's only lost in the playoffs in the biggest games with one of the best quarterbacks in Drew Brees to ever do it. So I'm not as high on Sean Payton. Leslie Frazier would be my guy. But either way, you need a coach who comes into the NFL with previous head coaching experience.
And you bring up the ownership group, which is new and going through its infancy of handling this team. If someone's unfamiliar with the Denver Broncos, how would you best describe this ownership group and the need for it to want to do well and win a Super Bowl?
Well, the Walton Penner family knows nothing but winning. You know, they've come from a successful business. They brought in Lewis Hamilton, Condoleezza Rice, Melody Hobson, many others who have been successful. They want to win, and that's a big part of why they chose the Broncos. They'd had previous opportunities to get into ownership. Greg and I spoke, and he said we were really excited about the Broncos and the opportunity it brings when it comes to winning. Now, as that group, they know you can move pieces as well as you need a great coach. You need a great head coach to get you in the right direction. So money's not going to be an issue. They have talent on defense, not enough talent to stop an AFC West Kansas City Chiefs, but they're close enough. You need one piece there, but you need multiple pieces on offense. This is a rebuild situation. You need 4 offensive linemen, a speed receiver for a number 1 receiver. You need 2 running backs. They've only got 1 in Javonte Williams. This is a big rebuild that the Broncos are facing, and it's because they've lied to themselves in the past. I believe the Walter Penner group will look at things as they are realistically and say we have to spend and build to get our way out of this.
All right, Ryan Harris giving us the lowdown on what's happening out there in Denver and the surrounding areas. Of course, that fan base so supportive of the Broncos. All they want to do is see their team win, and they haven't done so, at least make it to the postseason since Ryan Harris and his crew did it back in the 2015 season. All right, Ryan, certainly appreciate it. Taking a look at the draft order here, Broncos, with their record, would have been in line for the 3rd overall pick as it stands. However, because of the Russell Wilson trade, that goes to the Seahawks. So Seattle benefiting from what Denver is going through right now. So it'll be interesting to see. Also interesting to hear about the word rebuild with Ryan, because a lot of people thought Denver was a dark horse team, that they were just a quarterback away. Well, they got their quarterback, and they are far from reaching those expectations of getting to the postseason.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.